Good morning, boys and girls. I'm glad you're here again this morning. Today we're going to keep studying about Joseph, and then we're going to go on and talk more about the people in Egypt. Now remember, our last lesson was about Joseph, and he helped his brothers. Even though they were mad at him and acted ugly to him, he was good to them, and he helped them. So they stayed there in Egypt for a long, long time, and they raised their families there, and their families had families, and lots of Israelites began to be in Egypt. Pharaoh didn't like it anymore. So that's where our story is going to start today. Once there was a girl named Miriam who lived in Egypt. Her family were Hebrew slaves, and that's what they called the Israelites. They called them Hebrews, and they were slaves. Now, a slave is somebody that has to work really, really hard, and they don't get paid, and they just have to do everything the people tell them. And because the Pharaoh was mad at them, he made them do terrible work. He made them make bricks, and he didn't give them any straw or anything to make them with, so he was mean to them, and they were being treated really badly. There were many Hebrew slaves in Egypt working for the king. One day the king gave an order. There are too many Hebrews in Egypt. There must be no more baby boys. That is terrible. Can you imagine that he wanted to kill all the baby boys? And remember, we studied another story about that they killed all the baby boys, didn't they? And that was when Jesus was born, wasn't it? And they tried to kill him. So this old Pharaoh, they also called him a king, he was really mean. The king sent soldiers to all the Hebrew villages. If they found a baby boy, they would kill him. Miriam's mother had a baby boy. Her name was Jochebed. That's a funny name, isn't it? But her name was Jochebed, and she had a new baby boy. And she said, "What are we going to do? We can't let them kill our baby." That would be horrible, wouldn't it? So Miriam's mother made a basket and hid the baby. First, she hid him in the house for a long time, but then he got too big and he got to cry and make too much noise, and they said, "We can't keep him here anymore." So when he was 3 months old, they tried to hide him, and they put him in a basket. She found a basket and she painted it with tar-like stuff that made it not leak, because a basket has holes in it, doesn't it? And it would leak in the water. But she painted it with pitch and put it on the basket, and she wrapped the baby in a blanket and put him in the basket. Now, when no one was looking, Miriam and her mother carried the basket down to the river Nile and hid it among the bulrushes. Bulrushes are weeds and things that grow around the river. Miriam's mother hurried back to the house, leaving Miriam to watch the baby. All day Miriam hid by the bulrushes to watch and make sure the baby was safe. Now, wouldn't you be afraid if you were going to put your baby in the water and let him float down the river and you don't know what's going to happen? So Miriam watched to see what happened, because the mother couldn't stand to just leave the baby out there by himself, but they were trying to save his life. So Miriam watched behind the bulrushes, and sure enough, in a little while, she could hear someone coming. The king's daughter was walking on the riverbank with her servants, and she saw something floating in the bulrushes. "Go and get that for me," she told her servants. The servants brought the little basket to the king's daughter. It floated like a little boat, and the king's daughter looked inside, and she was so surprised. "It's a baby boy," she smiled, and the king's daughter lifted the baby from the basket. The baby began to cry. Okay, that's what babies do, don't they? They cry a lot. And so when she got him, he started to cry. "He must be a Hebrew baby," she said. "Poor little thing, are you hungry?" And so she felt sorry for the little baby, didn't she? Just then Miriam jumped up from her hiding place. "I will get someone to feed the baby for you and take care of him if you would like," she said. "Oh, yes, that's a good idea," said the king's daughter. Now, the king's daughter, if she'd had her own baby, she probably wouldn't have taken care of it. She would have had a nurse or someone that took care of the baby for her. So she was glad that Miriam was going to help her find someone to take care of the baby. Who do you think she's going to get? Let's see. Miriam ran to find her mother, and together they hurried back down to the river. "I will pay you money to feed this baby and look after him for me," said the king's daughter. And she handed the baby over to his mother, Jochebed. Miriam and her mother were very happy. They had saved their baby. They took the baby back home and cared for it until he was big enough to go back to the palace. The king's daughter was delighted. "I will raise him like my very own son," she said, "and I'm going to call him Moses because he was taken out of the water." His name would be Moses, and we're going to learn a lot of things about Moses because Moses grew up to be a very great man, and God used Moses for a lot of different things. So that's a good story of how they saved his life from the mean old Pharaoh that was going to kill all the baby boys. Okay, I have a little basket I made, and I put baby Moses in the basket. You can see baby Moses in, and this is kind of how she made it. And she put a top on it and covered it up and painted it with black tar so it wouldn't get water in it. And we're going to take it over to put it in our water and see what it looks like. Okay, boys and girls, let's retell the story and remember why Jochebed put her baby in the water. Remember, Jochebed lived there in Egypt. Pharaoh was being very mean to them, and he didn't know anything about Joseph, and they didn't have any special privileges then. They were made into slaves. Pharaoh said, "There's too many baby boys here. We're going to kill them." So Jochebed and her daughter, Miriam, decided that they would try to save baby Moses. So they made a basket, and they put a top on it like this, and they wrapped baby Moses in a blanket and put him in the basket and took him down to the river Nile and put him in the river. And Miriam went and hid over here behind the bushes and the bulrushes. She hid so she could watch and see where the baby went because it would float down the river and it could go far, far away. And so as the basket floated down the river, Miriam ran behind it and watched to see what was going to happen to her baby brother. And then she heard someone coming, and who was it? That's right, it was the king's daughter, and she was coming down to bathe in the river, and her servants were with her, and they saw that basket floating, and she said, "What is that? Go over there and get that basket for me." So they went and got the basket, and when she opened it up, she was so surprised. She found a baby, and she said, "Oh, it's one of the Hebrew babies." And the baby started crying, so she got him out of the river and she took him and held him. And the Bible says that when she got him out and she held him, he began to cry. And when he cried, she felt sorry for him. And she said, "Oh, I bet you're hungry. You need something to eat." And so when Miriam heard that, remember Miriam's his sister, she ran up to the princess and she said, I know somebody that will feed that baby for you and take care of him. Would you like for me to get him?" And she said, "Yes, go get her." And so she ran and she got his very own mother. She got Jochebed. She said, "Mother, come quick. They found the baby." So they ran back down to the river, and Jochebed got to get the baby and take it home. Now, I guess at this time he didn't have a name because they said that he stayed at home with his mother until he was big enough to go and live at the palace with the princess. He still had to go and live with her because she found him and she thought he was her baby. She didn't know that Jochebed was his real mother, did she? But anyway, so she took the baby back to the princess, and the princess said, "I'm going to name him Moses." And Moses means taken from the water. And so she named him Moses, and he lived in the palace with the princess until he grew up to be a grown man. And we're going to have lots of more stories about Moses because Moses was a real hard worker for God, and he did a lot of good things. So this is Moses when he was a baby, but we're going to talk about him when he grows up too. Okay, boys and girls, I really like the story of baby Moses, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And remember now, next week we're going to be talking about Moses again, but he's going to be a grown-up man by then. See you later. Bye-bye.